Today we're here to talk about cloud and virtualization. You've probably heard a lot about this topic in the financial services arena. Whether it has to do with increased cost, improved efficiency, or security, cloud is the topic of the day. I'm joined today by David Etue from SafeNet and Adam Honore from Nasdaq OMX to talk about cloud in the financial services arena. Adam, can you give me a sort of a preview of what does the financial services vertical look like with cloud offerings?
Sure. There's really three styles of offerings. There's the true horizontal, which would be like an Amazon Web Services or somebody else, which means you kind of get what you get, right? Mm-hmm. It's not bent for our vertical. You have the true vertical, which is like a NICE Technologies, an operational cloud focused on trading. And then you have kind of a hybrid approach, which is what Nasdaq offers with FinQloud, which is really an operational cloud for cost takeout. We're true partners with Amazon with some additional security. So you really have multiple options.
We've had a lot of conversations with our clients in the community about cloud, and one of the big challenges is that the perception of cloud is that cloud is insecure. David, can you talk a little bit about what folks are doing to try to protect themselves when they're moving to the cloud, and is that perception actually accurate?
As you move into a cloud environment, by nature, the benefits you get with cost and agility come at some loss of control, particularly of the lower layers of the infrastructure, that any cloud provider, even the most basic, is going to take over a lot of the networking compute components of the stack, and that has really changed how we have to think about security. And so, controls like identity and encryption all of a sudden become much more relevant. Where I think there's some perception issues is the cloud providers themselves, in many cases, actually take security very seriously, but aren't necessarily perceived to. And one of the examples I like to use is Amazon Web Services. They have what they call their shared responsibility model, and they explicitly state, here's what we're responsible for, here's what you're responsible for as a customer. And customers again understand that putting their data in the cloud without understanding what their responsibility is can put that at significant risk. And so really understanding that joint responsibility structure is a big difference than we're used to when we could control the entire confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the stack.
Well, that brings me to a good point, Adam. You've got a lot of experience in the financial services community. Are members of the community willing to take on your responsibility, my responsibility role, or do they expect more from their cloud provider to say, I'm going with you, I need X, Y, Z, especially when it comes to control and security?
Well, they might have the expectation, but they're not going to get it from any kind of major cloud provider,
right?
Because really financial services from a cloud perspective is a very small vertical. I mean, when you're talking about servicing Netflix versus servicing one of our banks, there's a significant difference there. So that's kind of how we embarked down this strategy. I mean, FinQloud was really an internal initiative. We're as regulated as everybody else at Nasdaq, and we wanted to take cost out of our organization.
But isn't that how AWS got started? AWS got started as
Absolutely.
an internal operation from Amazon.
Absolutely.
It was a spin out of their own sort of operational requirements.
Yeah, so there are certain things you have to do to satisfy the security constraints and requirements. And quite frankly, now that's not as much a technology problem as it is an education problem.
Mm-hmm. What are folks doing if they can't find the control? Are there other mechanisms to ensure the security?
Absolutely, and part of what I get to do at SafeNet is work with a number of the cloud providers and cloud consumers on models to do this. And so as the underlying infrastructure becomes a utility and outside of your control, we can start to do things at higher levels of the stack than we used to. So encryption, identity and authentication, areas where we focus at SafeNet, but other areas also like monitoring and use and fraud are very applicable at the higher levels of the stack. Clouds love encryption because one of the challenges that you have in taking a provider like Amazon, where infrastructure as a service, if you're going to run a system there, the storage backup, one of the great things of cloud and virtualization, it's very easy to back up systems, to take snapshots of them. Illustrating control of that data throughout a cloud provider's infrastructure can be very, very challenging from a security or audit perspective. When all of a sudden you wrap that in encryption and have strong encryption and good key management, you all of a sudden have the ability to abstract the visibility and control of that data away from the infrastructure itself. And that's been very popular because not only for security purposes, but also things like discovery, that if a law enforcement agency or regulator were to show up at a cloud provider and say, give me company XYZ's data, they only be given encrypted data and have to come back to company XYZ for encryption keys gives you a different set of data control. That discovery was a big issue for a lot of general counsels, particularly in the capital market space.
Well, you talk about encryption, though. I recall a few years ago there was a major problem one of the major encryption providers had with the authentication keys. I think it was RSA had a major breach. What have we learned since that to ensure that this doesn't happen again? Or are there ways to say, you know what, we can encrypt, but I also have to have proper key management?
Yep, and so in any architecture, it's important to understand what are the keys to the kingdom, and in the encryption space, obviously your encryption keys are that. Many folks, never give your cloud provider your encryption keys, because then you've basically erased the value of the encryption, because the data and the encryption keys are sitting next to each other. On the authentication side, there's some authentication that's powered by encryption that those keys are as important. In the one-time password world, there's something called a seed, that is the algorithm that's used to calculate the value on the token. And being able to illustrate the pedigree and the control of that seed is very important. And SafeNet has done a lot, as others in the space, following past events, to make sure that customers have the same control they can have of their encryption keys, they can have over a seed value in that authentication process.
So Adam, where do you see this going in the next few years? I mean, cloud, everyone's talking about it. We're starting to see more folks migrate to it. Do you see the vertical cloud environment taking off, or do you see it more being a horizontal play and folks moving more to an AWS environment?
I see a hybrid for a couple of reasons. One is there are vertically specific challenges, and that's really what we've done with FinQloud, is solve some of those addressable challenges.
The regulatory challenges.
Regulatory data.
Right.
Yeah, we went right after worm storage for 17A4 compliance. Which is the biggest nut to crack. I mean, here, move all your most secure data into the cloud, which is not a fun process to go through with people. But the next step that we see is people wanting to do back testing. And so a lot of the market data providers that we're talking to around historical time series data, figuring out ways to create a monetization of that that has benefit to the people who are all storing effectively the same data today, but the provider continues to make money. So instead of everybody storing it in a cloud environment, have the provider store it in a cloud environment and provide an access fee, reduces the cost of all the constituents, it makes the provider additional money. So it's creating an ecosystem. But then long term, as we create these verticals, if we do it right, one thing capital markets doesn't do very well, I think, is take advantage of the innovation that's occurring outside of our environment. And if we can apply what we're doing today, it creates an ecosystem for people in maybe pharmaceutical or mining or manufacturing to take advantage of something that is in capital markets, and vice versa. There might be a data set or a function that occurs in some other vertical that adds value to what we do. So it really creates a low-cost way for people to try new things, to innovate, to scale their business, because it's the best of both worlds. It's operational, but it's fixed cost on a variable basis.
Right.
So that's really, what we're trying to do is really bring the cost of everything down, which I know sounds funny coming from an exchange, but it's true.
Well, at that moment, I'm going to say thank you very much, because I think that in itself is a conversation I'd like to follow you up with. David, Adam, thank you very much for joining us. I think you're going to hear more about cloud. I think you're going to hear more about the providers. I think it's going to be a crowded market, but I think there's really room for some terrific innovation. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thanks.